The chamber is silent, not from peace, but from burden. Deep beneath the imperial palace, beneath the mountains of basalt, beneath the adamantium gates, beneath the ashes of 10,000 years, there lies the throne. It does not shine. It does not gleam with divine light. It is a slab of metal and gold, grafted with psychic conductors, life support organs, and relics that predate the Imperium. And at its center is him, the Emperor of mankind, not as he was nor as the people remember him, but as he remains, immobile, unbreathing, unseeing, but present, not a corpse, not a god, something else. There are no ceremonies in the throne room, no worship, no priests. The custodians, warriors older than any memory, maintain the chamber in absolute silence. They do not bow, they do not speak his name. They stand and they watch as they have watched for millennia. To breathe too loudly near the throne is to invite annihilation. There are still moments, flickers, when his mind flares outward, not by choice, like an old machine sparking in the dark. And when it does, the walls hum, the air burns, the psychers on Terra scream blood. The throne is not static. Every year it changes. No one understands all of it, not even the fabricator general of Mars, not even the sigillites of old. The machine spirit within has grown, restless. It is not anger and not sentience, but the throne resists decay. It refuses to die, just like him. The mechanicus fear the day it fails. There are schematics of the machine, yes, sacred, half-erased, encrypted with ancient Binharic prayers. Tech priests pore over them, generation after generation, like monks staring at scripture. But none can claim mastery, only maintenance. The throne requires 1,000 sacrifices every day, not metaphorical ones, real ones. The black ships bring psychers from every corner of the galaxy, men and women, children and elders who have seen too much or know too little. They are gathered, sorted, judged, and the ones deemed viable, those whose minds will not rupture instantly under strain, are placed into the soul chambers beneath the throne. They burn in silence. Their psychic essence is drawn into the machine, fed into the astronomicon, filtered through him, and he endures. None outside the Adeptus Custodes and the High Lords have ever seen the Emperor with their own eyes. And even the High Lords do not look at him directly. They speak from a lower chamber, a pit looking up. Their voices are amplified, their messages formal, coded, scripted. They never presume that he hears, but they hope. Sometimes a flicker occurs, a breath that isn't, a pulse through the golden spine of the machine. One of the custodians will stiffen, another will close his eyes. No words, but meaning, and that is enough. Some say the Emperor chooses to stay silent, that his mind exists in higher planes, layers of thought beyond time, beyond comprehension. That what we call his silence is not silence at all, but patience. Others claim he has become a machine spirit, merged with the throne itself. No longer a man, but a node of divine calculation, watching the paths of fate spin endlessly across the void. The truth? No one knows. But they still come. Saints, prophets, psychers, they kneel before the gates of the throne, miles above where he sits. They pray. Some are answered, most are not. The ones who claim visions are marked, some by fire, some by madness, a few by radiance. The golden throne is not a symbol to those who stand nearest it. It is a burden. There is no triumph in it, only the reality that without it, without him, mankind would already be gone. The warp would have swallowed Terra. The demons would walk in flesh. The stars would be dead. And so he sits. This is not stasis. This is war, unseen, constant. Through the throne, the Emperor holds back storms that no mortal understands. The warp claws at the edge of reality. The veil is thin. Chaos watches. Chaos waits. But it cannot pass. Not while he is enthroned. Not while the beacon burns. And that is all that remains of the dream. No longer a great crusade. No longer unity. No longer enlightenment. Only the throne. And the emperor, eternal, enduring, entombed, but undefeated. The webway groans beneath terror, unseen and unhealed. A wounded artery in the body of the galaxy, pulsing with warp-tainted blood, its fissures still slick with the residue of that ancient incursion. To most, it is legend, another forbidden tale of the heresy, filed away in the sealed vaults of memory. But to the Emperor, it is present, constant, alive. The Golden Throne is more than a life support device, more than a prison. It is a gate. Beneath it lies a rupture to a realm that should have remained forever closed to the warp. The Emperor knows this. He has known this for 10,000 years. No one else bears the burden. The webway portal beneath the throne had once been a gateway to salvation, humanity's path to a future free of the warp, of demonic interference, of navigators and psychic navigation. A clean corridor through the galaxy. He had almost succeeded, but almost is a word steeped in failure. The portal was compromised, the breach was not closed, the enemy found its way in, and though the demons were cast back, though the passageways were sealed with fire and blade, it was not enough. The tear remained, the wound never healed, the Imperium never built another gate, and the Emperor never left. From the moment of his enthronement, he has done more than endure. He has stood vigil. His soul is stretched across space and thought, rooted into the throne, pressing down upon that ragged rent in reality. His consciousness does not sleep. It cannot. The moment it does, the warp will surge forward, dragging terror into the abyss. Through the warp, the webway remains a battlefield, not one of guns or blades, but of presence and pressure. The Emperor's mind rests like a monolith atop a fractured seal. Demons push and claw at the other side, whispering lies, offering visions, screaming in languages formed of entropy. They cannot see him, but they feel him. They feel his defiance. They feel the pain that has become permanence, and it repels them. Every hour of every day, the Emperor reshapes the boundary. Not with words, not with rituals, but with sheer will. He is the lock. He is the seal. There is no conduit, no psychic relay, no backup system. If he stops, the barrier falls. The custodians know this. The Mechanicus pretends to understand it, mapping the area with sensors and sacred machine prayers. But only he can feel it fully. It is not a place. It is a state. The breach vibrates with potential, forever one mistake away from catastrophe. No human dares go near the buried sections of the webway. The tunnels have been collapsed, the entrances layered with hexagrammic wards and forbidden script. The doors are sealed with blackstone so pure that even the demons shrink from it. But none of this is enough. Not truly. These are feeble measures, emergency bindings. The true seal is thought, golden and unwavering. The demons remember their last approach. They remember the golden light that scorched entire portions of the webway, burning thought and shadow alike. They remember the scream that was not heard by ears, but felt in the bones of their twisted forms. The Emperor does not strike as a warrior. He unravels, he annihilates. But he cannot relax, he cannot rebuild, he cannot step away. There are moments when the warp pushes hard, when the seal quakes and the black stone walls hum with pressure. In those moments, the throne's systems strain. Energy is rerouted, sacrifices increase. Entire groups of psychers die in synchronized agony as the Emperor draws deeper from the well of human life. Their deaths are not noticed, not marked. Their names are dust, but their minds are consumed like fuel, keeping the fire alive. The pressure passes, and then silence again. Until the next wave, the High Lords of Terra are aware, barely. They understand that the Emperor's strength is finite, that the webway below the throne is still open, still flawed. But they speak of it only in closed sessions, in terrified murmurs. There is no plan, no successor, no solution. There is only the vigil. Some radical elements within the Ordo Malleus have theorized about sealing the webway portal permanently, destroying the lower sections, annihilating the gateway with a focused detonation of holy atomic fire. But such a suggestion never passes committee. To damage the portal is to risk drawing more attention. To tamper with the seals is to tempt annihilation. And the Emperor keeps watch. There are signs, always, lights that flicker in the deep. Custodes who wake from dreamless slumber, soaked in cold sweat. Servo skulls drifting off course as if repelled by unseen force. Once, a psyker collapsed mid-communion with the Astronomicon, whispering in a tongue unknown to mankind, describing a gate of screaming glass, a lion-headed shadow, and a golden fist that crushed it. The gate did not open, but it wanted to. Sometimes, they say, the Emperor's mind stretches further, into the webway itself, walking corridors no one else dares enter. Some within the Adeptus Astra Telepathica believe he places his mind like a shield across multiple converging fault lines in the skein, holding not one rift, but many. But none can prove it. None can measure what he sees. Saints have emerged from the depths of meditation, claiming to witness a burning form walking the webway, a man of light pushing back tides of darkness, not with anger, but with sorrow. These visions are either canonized or condemned, depending on who hears them. But they continue, because the webway continues. The fight never ended. And the Emperor, broken though his body is, still fights. He speaks no words. He sends no messages. But through pressure, through presence, through sheer psychic mass, he tells the enemy, "You do not pass. The demons hate this, hate him. He is not a warp entity, not a god. He does not obey their rules. He resists without bargaining, without manifesting. They cannot tempt him. They cannot corrupt him. He is unreachable. To them he is not a being. He is an obstruction, a dam, a wound they cannot infect. But they keep pushing, because that is what they are, and he keeps resisting, because that is what he must be. And so the throne endures, the webway groans, the fire beneath Terra never dies, and the Emperor's vigil never ends. Across the night sky of the Imperium, there is one constant, not a star, not a light, a pressure. It is the Astronomicon. To navigators, it is a pulse, a blazing signal in the dark that tells them where Terra is, no matter how lost in the warp they may be. To psychers, it is pain and ecstasy, like staring at the sun with their minds. And to the Emperor, it is his voice, stretched thin across a galaxy drowning in shadows. But the Astronomicon is not a lighthouse built of glass and metal. It is not a tower. It is a fire, and he is the flame. Every second it burns because he allows it. Not through direct action or command, but through constant, immovable will. He does not cast a spell to keep it active. He is the spell. A ritual given form, a psychic mechanism that no mortal truly comprehends. The Astronomicon sits in the heart of Terra, above the Imperial Palace, just meters away from the Emperor's golden throne. It is a fortress, a generator, a soul furnace, and it never sleeps. 1,000 psychers are bound within its mechanisms at all times. They are called the Choir. Handpicked by the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, these psychers are not trained for battle. They are trained to die, burned down to their essence and poured into the flame. Every few weeks the choir dies and another takes its place. They are fed into the beacon like logs into a pyre, but the flame does not spread without guidance, and the Emperor provides it. His mind, distant, focused elsewhere, broken in 1,000 places, nonetheless threads itself into the astronomican's pulse. His thoughts amplify the choir. They give the signal clarity, direction, persistence. Without him, the psychic energy would scatter like heat in the void. Without him, the light would go out, and then the galaxy would go dark. Navigators cannot operate without the astronomican. It is their guide star, their only compass through the madness of the warp. The Emperor does not pilot the ships of mankind, but he is the hand on the helm of all of them. Through him, the Imperium moves. Through him, it reaches. Without him, the warp would swallow every vessel whole. The Administratum understands this in abstract terms. They write equations. They map warp currents. They count the dead when the beacon flickers. But they do not feel what it means when the Emperor shifts his focus. Only the navigators do. They speak of moments when the light bends, when the song of the astronomican grows sharp or soft, when the guidance changes, not in strength but in character. These are the moments they call the breaths, and they terrify them, because it means he is moving, not his body but his mind. Shifting attention, like a god breathing in the void. There are entire voyages recorded in navigator memory where the light of the astronomican became a whisper of wrath, others where it sang with sorrow. One journey, centuries ago, recorded the light as laughter, a cold, metallic ringing that made half the ship's crew weep in silence for days. The beacon does not just guide, it expresses, and no one controls it. Every day the flame is fed, thousands of psychers die. They are chosen by the black ships, trained at the Scholastia Sicana, and finally marched in silence to the throne precincts. Most go willingly. A few must be sedated, but all are given the same understanding. They will see the Emperor. They will touch his mind, and then they will vanish. Their souls are used not for war, not for defense, not even for prophecy. They become light. They become map and compass. They become direction. And in the heart of that blaze, the Emperor lingers. His presence is not seen. It is not felt in the conventional sense, but it is there. Sharp, precise, immense. The beacon obeys not because it is programmed, but because it is anchored to him. When the choir begins its chant, it is not just their voices that echo. It is his thought behind theirs, his pressure behind their push, like wind behind sails, like gravity behind weight. The beacon's range is vast, but not infinite. It fades at the galaxy's edge. Beyond its reach lies uncertainty, faith, and fate, and those outer regions suffer for it. Travel becomes madness, ships vanish, empires drift from the Imperium's grasp. The Mechanicus dreams of building a second astronomican, another light on another world powered by cloned psychers, warp reactors, digital relics. But it always fails, because it is not the machine that guides the light. It is him. No replica can capture that. No star can be lit without that soul. During the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, the astronomican did not go out, but it became dim, broken, flickering. Whole sectors lost sight of it. Thousands of ships were stranded. Billions died waiting for guidance that would never come. It was the first time since the heresy that the Imperium tasted what it would be like without the Emperor's light, and it did not survive well. Only when Guilliman returned, only when new rituals and fresh choirs were installed, did the light begin to burn steady again. Even then it was different, angrier, colder, not cruel but distant, focused. Some say the Emperor had changed, that he had chosen to no longer merely guide, but to judge. No one knows. But the astronomican is not what it once was. There are whispers within the navigator houses, rumors of ships that saw the light twist into a figure. A silhouette burning with thought, eyes like twin stars, watching, measuring. Others claim to have heard words through the beacon, not spoken aloud but pressed directly into the soul. Go no further. This is not your path. Turn back. Some obeyed, some didn't. The ones who disobeyed vanished. The High Lords deny these stories. The Inquisition burns those who spread them. But the flame burns all the same. The Astronomicon is more than a tool. It is the Emperor's reach, his influence made manifest. A weapon of light, a wall against chaos, a line that says, this far, no farther. And he holds it. Still, every day, every moment. The choirs will continue to die, the beacon will continue to burn, and in the center of it, as always, is him. There is a procession that never ends. It moves in silence across space, through cities and hives, beneath the stars and beyond the warp. Its name is never spoken aloud by the common people, but all know it in their bones. It is the black ships. When they arrive, the sky darkens, not physically, not with storm or shadow, but with dread. Their hulls are monolithic, blacker than voidstone, absent of markings, as if the Emperor himself carved them from the absence of light. They descend like judgments, and when they leave, they take part of the world with them. The tithe is not of food, it is not of gold, or ore, or soldiers. It is of souls, more specifically, psychers. To sustain the Astronomicon, to power the Golden Throne, and to feed the psychic needs of the Imperium's war machine, psychers are harvested across the galaxy. This is not new. It has happened since the first days after the Horus heresy. But few ever speak of it plainly. Every year, millions are taken. Their numbers are counted not by names, but by mass, measured in weight, sorted by potential, categorized by the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, and marked for their fate. Not all will die in service. Some will become sanctioned psychers, others will serve the military or the Inquisition, but the vast majority are destined for one thing only, the Emperor's throne. The process is methodical, cold, systemic. The black ships arrive without announcement. They descend upon hive cities and frontier worlds alike. Their agents, known only as the Silent Order, spread across population centers with portable detection arrays and gene spectrography rituals. They do not speak. They do not ask. They simply collect. Children, adults, elders, anyone with the spark. Families are not told where their kin go. Most assume death. Some hope for elevation, but they do not resist, because to resist the tithe is to invoke extermination. On more than one occasion, worlds that tried to hide their psychers have been purged entirely by the Inquisition. The Imperium tolerates mutation. It tolerates heresy. But it does not tolerate rogue psychers. Psychers are dangerous. That is the creed of the Imperium. And it is true, they are gates to the warp, unwitting beacons for demonic presence, living breaches in the membrane of reality. Even the weakest of them, under stress or madness, can tear open holes in the world large enough to swallow cities. But the Emperor requires them. They are not resources, they are sacrifices. To fuel the throne, to anchor the Astronomicon, to keep his mind tethered to the galaxy, psychers must die. Not in war, not in fire, in communion. Once aboard the black ships, the psychers undergo testing, not to measure power, but resilience. Some break during transit, their minds implode, others become possessed. The ships are equipped with kill chambers for this very reason. Entire decks can be jettisoned into space and sanctified by remote prayer. Those who survive the journey reach Terra. They are processed in the labyrinth beneath the Imperial Palace, a place the Inquisition denies even exists. The Chamber of Souls. There the psychers are sorted. The strongest are burned last. Their essence must sustain the Emperor's psychic needs for longer than the rest. They are broken into cycles, infused with chemicals that dull panic and pain. They do not scream. They cannot. Their mouths are bound. Their minds are sedated. And when the time comes, they are lowered into the golden lattice that connects directly to the throne. And they vanish. Not their bodies, their souls. No one knows what the Emperor experiences when these psychers pass into him. Some scholars believe he sees their memories. Others say he feels only the energy. Still others claim that in his broken state, he is aware of everything, their fear, their love, their confusion. But he does not stop it, because he cannot. This tithe is not cruelty, it is not vengeance, it is function. Without it, the Emperor's flame flickers, the Astronomicon dims, the webway shudders, and the psychic load of the galaxy begins to fall out of balance. Even now, the number of psychers required grows each year. The warp grows stronger, storms last longer, demonic incursions increase. The Emperor's will must push harder to maintain what little stability remains. And so the black ships must harvest more, every generation, more psychers, more minds, more sacrifice. Entire planets exist only to breed and collect psychers. They are not called by such names, of course. They are hidden under titles like Terra-assigned gene cultivation colonies or Scholastica Sicana reserves. But their purpose is the same, to feed the Emperor. There are rumors, uttered only by radicals and heretics, that the Emperor once despised this practice, that he wished for mankind to transcend psychic slavery, to become something more. But those dreams are dust. Now there is only necessity. The custodians do not participate in the tithe, but they know of it. They guard the chambers. They maintain the corridors where psychers are marched in lines, blindfolded and humming toward their end. Some of the older custodes remember the early days, when the tithe was smaller, when fewer minds were needed to sustain the throne. They do not speak of those times, because they do not matter anymore. There are signs that the system is failing. In recent centuries, several black ships have not returned, lost in warp storms, overwhelmed by demonic boarding, or worse, betrayed from within. There are reports buried in Ordo Malleus archives of psychers mutinying aboard the black ships, of entire crews falling to madness, of ships arriving at Terra with no one left alive. The Emperor still burns, but the cost increases. There are voices within the Imperium who suggest building alternative methods, cloning psychers, tapping planetary cores for psychic energy, constructing artificial soul engines. But none of these projects succeed, because the Emperor does not require energy. He requires souls, human ones. They must be living, they must be real, and they must choose, even in silence, to give themselves. There is no substitute, no shortcut, no replacement. And so the tithe continues. The black ships fly, the psychers are gathered, they are judged, they are offered. And the Emperor endures. Beneath the golden throne, beneath the black stone foundations of the imperial palace, there is a place where souls do not die, they do not rise, and they do not pass. They are bound. It is not a chamber in the traditional sense. It is a matrix, a weave of psychic energy, gold-inlaid circuitry, rune-engraved conduit channels, and neurothermic steel. Tech priests call it the Null Sanctum. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica name it the Echo Vault. But to the throne's silent architects, it has no name at all. It is simply where the Emperor stores what he cannot let go. Not all psychers die cleanly when fed into the throne. Some are too strong, too unique, too resonant with the currents of the warp. When they die, they do not unravel. Their soul mass condenses, folds in upon itself, resists dispersion. Most of these are burned down with psychic fire. The custodians purify them, the black priests of Terra isolate them, and the echoes are snuffed out before they can metastasize. But a very few, are kept. Why? No one in the Imperium truly knows. Not the High Lords, not the Navigators, not the scribes of the Ordo Hereticus. The process is buried under 10,000 years of sealed rites, forbidden texts, and untranslatable cogitator rituals. But the pattern is there. These psychers are not devoured. They are repurposed. Their souls are bound. To bind a soul is to perform a psychic operation more complex than any weapon or spell. It requires precision, stability, and, above all, direction. The soul must want to remain, or it will fracture. The Emperor ensures this with a single monumental pressure of will. He speaks no words. There is no ceremony, but the dying mind, in that final instant before annihilation, feels his attention. And it stays. Not alive, not conscious, but present, like a spark pressed into crystal, held in stasis. These bound souls become tools of impossible value. They are memory anchors, signal harmonics, raw psychic insulation. They allow the throne to operate beyond its theoretical limit. They act as foci, refining and re-amplifying the Emperor's will across the Astronomican's burning core. And some do more than that. Some whisper. There are accounts, recorded in code-black inquisitorial archives, of astropaths during soul-bonding rituals hearing voices, not from the warp, not from demons. From within the golden throne, one voice weeps, another laughs, one repeats fragments of high Gothic poetry, written 3,000 years ago on a long-dead world, another speaks in mathematical formula, always the same ones, looping. These are not hauntings. They are resonance, echoes of psycher minds, still caught in the pulse stream of the Emperor's thoughts. Alive? Number but not gone. To understand the binding is to stand at the edge of a paradox. The Emperor does not consume these souls. He does not break them. He uses them as a prism, funneling his psychic intent through their unique patterns, allowing it to interact with the materium in ways otherwise impossible. Some are aligned to protection, others, communication. A few, it is said, are weapons, held within the throne like thunderbolts in a storm. It is impossible to predict which psychers are selected for binding. Power alone is not enough. Many potent psychers are incinerated without trace, but others, weak or unstable, are preserved. The only common trait is resonance, a harmonic match with the Emperor's vast psychic frequency. The closer the soul's pitch to his, the more stable the binding. The Mechanicus does not claim to understand this process. They record it. They witness it. They build the infrastructure to maintain it. But the soul is not a machine. It does not obey binary or protocol. It responds to intent. And the Emperor's intent is absolute. Every bound soul is housed in what the Mechanicus calls a psychocrypt, an obelisk of null field containment layered with protective canticles, inverted sigils, and raw blackstone. These are embedded within the throne's inner architecture, like circuit nodes in a great neural lattice. They glow only when called upon. Some have not activated for millennia. Others shimmer constantly, like coals in a windless fire. It is said that the Emperor can channel his will through any of them at any time, that he may use one soul to amplify his command, another to interpret signals from the warp, another to lash out in psychic fury when the throne is threatened. They are his extensions, his choir, his prismed self. And there are older bindings, ones that predate the Horus heresy. A few sources, nameless and quickly silenced, speak of precursors. Proto-psycher souls bound to the throne when it was still being constructed. Ancient remnants of humanity's golden age. Men and women who communed with the Emperor before the Imperium existed, their minds preserved like fossils in a living machine. No records confirm this, But one account, smuggled from a lost Forge world before its annihilation, claims that a soul within the throne once spoke in pre-imperial Low Gothic, naming the Emperor not as master, but as brother. The Inquisition denies this account, but it exists. The binding process has limits, too many souls, and the lattice destabilizes. Too few, and the psychic throughput begins to fail. The Emperor, even in his immobile state, constantly balances the lattice, shifting soul energy, regulating output, purging corruption when needed. When a soul-bound node fails, it does not simply die, it screams. All astropaths on Terra feel it. They go blind for minutes. Blood flows from their noses. Their internal organs feel as if they're turning inside out. Then silence returns, and the throne continues to burn. No explanation is given, no repair is made. The lattice adapts. The Emperor adapts. In moments of great need, rare, terrible moments, the Emperor is said to unbind one of these souls. Not destroy it, but release it into the warp, to carry a message or strike an enemy, or erase an incursion before it reaches the walls of Terra. These events are not officially documented, but navigators have reported warp currents shifting suddenly, tearing across thousands of light years in moments, entire demonic fleets blinking out of existence without cause, planets saved by storms of golden fire that no ship could have carried. The throne is not passive, and neither are the souls within it. This is the price of vigilance, not just the Emperor's own strength, but the fragments of humanity he chooses to preserve, each one a note in the symphony of his will. They are not saints, they are not martyrs, they are tools, refined by pain, held by purpose, burning forever within the binding halls of the Golden Throne. In the deepest levels of the ecclesiarchal vaults, there is a mural, a painting older than the Schola Progenium itself. It shows a radiant figure of gold, faceless and immense, reaching down from a throne of light. Surrounding him are billions in prayer. Some are kneeling, others prostrate. All of them are weeping. The artist's name has been lost, the pigment has faded, but the title remains etched in holy script beneath the frame, Deus Imperator, the living God. This is not just devotion, this is doctrine, this is faith. When the Emperor was first enthroned, there was no cult, no organized worship, no divine ritual. He had forbidden it. In life, he rejected godhood. His war was against superstition, mysticism, and the old gods of the warp. To elevate him was, in his own decree, heresy. But when the heresy ended and silence fell across the galaxy, a vacuum opened, a void that the human spirit could not abide. And into that silence the imperial cult was born. It did not begin on Terra. It began in whispers, in prisons, in refugee camps on war-shattered worlds. It began with mothers praying to a name, with soldiers surviving demonic encounters and claiming it was his will that shielded them. It began in the dark corners of the Imperium, among the forgotten and the broken. Faith grows not in comfort, but in fear, and fear was everywhere. The warp storms had not yet cleared. The scars of Horus's betrayal stretched across every sector. Planets were still smoldering, primarchs were gone, the Emperor no longer spoke. And so the people began to speak for him. At first it was dismissed. The administratum saw it as harmless peasantry ritual, but it spread, fast. Preachers emerged, self-ordained, ragged, burning with zeal. They claimed visions of golden light, dreams of a voice that calmed the warp. Entire planetary populations began erecting altars to the throned god. The first schism came on the world of Dominica. A shrine built around a statue of the emperor drew 10 million pilgrims in a single year. Attempts to dismantle it led to riots. When the Arbites intervened, the pilgrims fought back with fire and chain blades. 40,000 died. but the shrine remained. It stands to this day. The High Lords were divided. Some believed the cult would unify the Imperium in a way no policy ever could. Others feared the rise of uncontrolled fanaticism, but the balance tipped when Saint Ecclesia appeared in the eastern fringe. She was a blank, psychically null, immune to the warp. Yet she spoke with prophetic clarity. Her voice was said to cause pain in demons. She carried no weapon. Her only tools were her sermons. Entire chaos cults collapsed in her presence. Her followers recorded her words. He sits not dead, but dreaming. Not dreaming, but seeing. Not seeing, but shaping. She called him the God Emperor, and millions believed. The turning point came with the rise of Gog Vandir. As High Lord of the Administratum and de facto ruler of the Imperium, Vandir twisted the faith of the people into a tool of power. He claimed to serve the Emperor's will directly, enforced by the fanatical brides of the Emperor, an all-female militant order that worshipped the throne as divine. They were renamed the Daughters of the Emperor, and they killed in his name. Vandir's reign was a time of terror. Billions died. Holy wars were waged not against Xenos or heretics, but against imperial citizens. The cult was weaponized. It became dogma. It became tyranny. But even in this, the Emperor shaped events. In a moment remembered as the passage of light, Alicia Dominica, the leader of the brides, was granted access to the throne itself. No one knows what she saw. She never recorded it. But when she emerged, she was changed. She turned her blade on Vandir. She ended his tyranny. And she founded the Adeptus Sororitas, the military arm of the ecclesiarchy, sworn to protect the faith but never again enslaved to a man. In the centuries that followed, the ecclesiarchy formalized the imperial cult. Cathedrals were built across the stars, sermons became structured, saints were canonized, pilgrimages were sanctioned, the ministorum was born, with terror at its heart, and the emperor became a god. Not by declaration, but by belief. The throne remains silent. The emperor does not speak, but the faithful claim to feel his presence. They point to miracles, statues that bleed golden ichor, voices in warp storms, visions of saints blazing with light. Many of these events are fraud, some are mass delusion, but not all. There are recorded cases of warp storms collapsing at the words of a lone priest, of plague worlds healed by a single prayer, of demons recoiling from hymns in High Gothic. Even inquisitors, skeptical and armed with every tool of reason, have knelt at shrines and wept, not from belief, but from contact, because something listens. The rise of the imperial cult has reshaped the Imperium. It provides unity, purpose, structure. Faith has become the mortar holding a crumbling empire together. For many, it is all they have, but it has also bred extremism, purges, witch hunts, the execution of mutants and unsanctioned psychers without trial. The faith is not gentle, it is fire, and yet the emperor allows it. Perhaps because he must, he does not appear. He does not correct doctrine. He does not silence the mad. But through the veil, through the Astronomicon, through the warp-tuned hearts of the truly faithful, he exerts direction, not with words, but with presence. There are those who claim to hear him, not in voice but in conviction. Saints like Sabbat, Celestine, and the firewalkers of Thor. They move not with logic, but with certainty. They burn with his will. And when they fall, the Imperium remembers, not their names, not their deeds, but that they were his. To worship the Emperor is to place oneself within a structure of eternal war. It is to accept pain, death, and sacrifice as divine acts. It is not comfort. It is not salvation. It is submission. And still they kneel. On every world, in every sector, at dawn and dusk, they pray, they die, and they rise again, for him. In the Imperium, the Emperor is silent, but silence is not absence, and absence is not weakness. There are moments, rare, cataclysmic moments, when the veil between his stillness and his fury tears open, when the golden throne becomes not a seat of quiet will, but a furnace of divine retribution. These moments are not planned. They are not invoked by ritual or prophecy. They erupt. They consume. They are the storms of the Emperor's wrath. The most infamous occurred in the final centuries of M36, a time of corruption, of heresy blooming like mold in the cracks of the Imperium's rusted architecture. The age of apostasy had ended with the fall of Gog van Dyer, but the echoes of his tyranny lingered. Ecclesiarchs grew fat on power, sector governors defied orders, astropaths whispered of warp fluctuations that no psyker could decipher. And then, without warning, it began. The Astronomicon pulsed, not steadily but violently. Navigators recoiled in their tanks, blood flooding from their eyes. Entire fleets became lost mid-transit, slingshot into impossible trajectories. On Cadia, the skies turned gold. On Ophelia 7, cathedrals burned from within, their glass windows exploding outward in silent screams. No voice cried out. But the Emperor had moved. Terra felt it first. Deep beneath the palace, the Adeptus Custodes felt the air change. The throne room, where no sound should echo, shook with a noise that could not be described. Not thunder, not music, something deeper, a harmonic of fury, resonating through plasteel and bone. The throne's censors flared. The black priests of the cult Mechanicus recorded impossibilities, increases in Sei output without corresponding choir activity. Warp density shifts around the throne's core. Machines blinked out of synchrony. One scribe, after witnessing the readings, tore out his eyes and whispered, "He is awake. He is watching." The waves spread outward. On over 1,000 worlds, psychic phenomena erupted with no warp signature, no demonic presence, just force. Orbital stations were torn from the sky. PDF regiments dropped their weapons, overcome by unexplainable emotion, awe, terror, guilt. On Decidra Prime, every ecclesiastical leader collapsed dead within an hour, clutching at their chests as if struck by an invisible hand. The survivors began to chant, without prompting, without knowing why. They spoke a single phrase in unity: "His wrath has come." The Inquisition launched immediate investigations. The Ordo Malleus suspected a coordinated demonic incursion. The Ordo Hereticus accused an internal psychic conspiracy. But there were no warp rifts, no cult signals, no external enemy, only judgment. And it bore the Emperor's seal. There are several theories as to what triggered this storm. Some believe it was an attempted assault on the Golden Throne itself, an infiltration by a demonic presence, too subtle to be noticed, but potent enough to threaten his stasis. Others argue it was a psychic backlash from a particularly egregious heresy enacted within the upper echelons of the Ministorum. Still others whisper of a failed ritual, an experiment by the Adeptus Mechanicus to tap into the Emperor's latent power, backfiring with cataclysmic results. None of these theories have been proven. All that is known is this: the Emperor responded. The storm lasted 8 days. On the 3rd day, warp storms across Segmentum Solar calmed completely, unnaturally, as if smoothed by a massive hand. Chaos fleets attempting to enter real space were simply shredded, torn apart mid-materialization. On the 6th day, 5 minor Xenos races went completely extinct. Inquisitorial agents investigating the event found entire planetary crusts shattered. No life signs, no survivors. Just silence. By the 8th day, the pulse had faded. The Astronomicon steadied. The throne cooled. But the memory remained. Many recorded it as a miracle. The ecclesiarchy declared it a moment of divine cleansing. Thousands of shrines were built across the segmentum solar to mark the passage of wrath. Pilgrims still travel to these sites today, seeking the lingering warmth of that fury. But to others it was a warning that the Emperor may be bound but not asleep, that his will, though silent, can still reach across the stars, and when it moves it does not discriminate, it does not debate, it burns. And this was not the only such event. Records exist, buried, restricted, often classified as apocrypha ultima, of similar moments. Moments when the Astronomicon screamed instead of sang, when the throne surged beyond containment, when demons fled from battlefields without cause. Each of these events shares one trait. There is no trace of who or what triggered them, just a feeling, a pressure, a message. No more. Some within the Inquisition believe that these storms are not spontaneous, but intentional, that the Emperor, in his broken yet vast consciousness, maintains a kind of emotional threshold. He watches, he endures. But when certain limits are crossed, when specific patterns of treachery, corruption, or warp incursion accumulate, he reacts, like a circuit breaker or a thunderstorm. These are not acts of strategy. They are not tactical interventions. They are raw, unchecked will, spasms of a mind too massive to comprehend, too fractured to fully direct, and yet still woven into the heart of mankind. To be near one of these storms is to feel something ancient and immense glance in your direction. Not with malice, not with intent, with judgment. One adepta sororitas canonis, who survived such a pulse while on crusade in the halo stars, later wrote, "I felt my soul peeled back like parchment. Every memory, every sin, every prayer I ever whispered in fear, I relived them all in a moment, and then I felt nothing, not hatred, not love, just wait. As if a god had looked at me and decided whether to close his hand or let me go." The Mechanicus has long tried to measure these phenomena. They analyze radiation, chronotemporal drift, psychic residue, but no model fits. The energy levels don't match any known warp signatures. The fluctuations don't follow demonic logic. The only conclusion they dare to record is this: the throne is not inert. And so the Imperium continues to fear, even as it worships. The Ecclesiarchy preaches his love, his guidance, his sacrifice. But every planetary governor, every inquisitor, every rogue trader who has felt the true weight of that unseen gaze knows better. The Emperor is not a kind god. He is not merciful. He is not cruel. He is necessary, and necessity has no patience for failure. The Golden Throne is not merely a machine. It is not a chair, nor a relic, nor even a simple life support system. It is an ark, a prison, a psychic engine, a god forge, and at its center sits the most powerful human mind to have ever existed, shattered, infinite, and still burning. For millennia, the Imperium has revered the throne as the Emperor's seat of power. But few understand its true function. Fewer still grasp its secrets, and those who seek too deeply into its purpose often vanish, erased by the silent custodians of terror or consumed by the knowledge itself. Because the Golden Throne is far more than a conduit. It is a gate, a lock, and perhaps a weapon. Constructed at the height of the Great Crusade, the throne was not initially intended to preserve a dying emperor. Its original design was far more ambitious, to serve as a psychic keystone for humanity's passage through the webway. The Emperor had sought to create a portal, a stable human-made gateway through the labyrinthine dimension used by the Eldar, a means for mankind to traverse the stars without relying on the warp. He had almost succeeded. The Webway project, buried beneath the palace in the depths of Terra's soil, had reached its final stages before the betrayal of Horus shattered everything. The Golden Throne, meant to stabilize the massive rift between real space and the webway, became a life preserver instead. When the demonic incursion flooded the tunnel system, the Emperor sacrificed his body to seal the breach. What was once a door became a dam, and the Golden Throne became the wall, holding that dam shut. The Mechanicus cannot repair it. Not fully. They maintain it, patch it, tune it, replace failing components as best they can, but the throne's complexity exceeds even the data vaults of Mars. Entire forge worlds are dedicated to crafting its replacement parts, often based on blueprints they cannot read, repeating rituals they do not understand. Some whisper that the throne is changing, organically, psychically evolving, that it shifts in ways imperceptible to sensors, but apparent to those who spend decades in its presence. Tech priests who attend to its systems sometimes vanish for weeks into trance, emerging with eyes white and tongues burned black, speaking of golden geometries that move against logic. They call it mechanical divinity. But what it is, even they dare not claim. The Adeptus Custodes guard the throne not only to protect the Emperor, but to contain him, to ensure that no one tampers with its systems, and to silence any suggestion that the throne may hold more than the Emperor's psychic flame. Their vigilance is absolute. Even the High Lords of Terra may only approach its sanctum with permission. Most never set foot within sight of it. Those who do not speak of what they see. Yet, over the past century, something has changed. The throne's power flux has grown unstable. Astropathic reports from Terra describe surges in the Astronomicon that cannot be explained. Warp echoes ripple from the palace in patterns that form symmetries, impossible shapes, coherent and resonant, almost as if the throne is speaking, not in words, but in structure, a language of light and pulse. One inquisitor called it a heartbeat of godhood. Some believe the throne is beginning to awaken, that the Emperor's mind, long scattered and fragmented, is pulling itself back together, that his presence within the throne has reached critical psychic density, enough to begin pushing outward again. There are signs. The throne now interferes with advanced augury systems. Vox signals scramble within certain corridors of the Imperial Palace. Custodes report dreams, something unheard of for warriors who live in perfect mental discipline. These dreams are never violent. They are memories, but not their own. They see a world of green hills and thunder clouds, a tall man, faceless but familiar, walking alone. When they awaken, they are silent for hours. No one forces them to speak. The Black Priests of Mars have attempted deeper scans. A recent experiment, led by fabricator Archmagus Urox Veret 0, attempted to link a modified servitor array directly into the throne's tertiary interface. The machine survived for exactly 14.3 seconds. Then it melted from the inside. What little data was recovered revealed a fractal overload. Recursive signals folding into themselves faster than thought, as if the throne had reached into the machine's mind and broken it by revealing too much. The Mechanicus immediately classified the incident, but the word revelation has since entered their official documentation. Not all interpretations are hopeful. Some see this activity as a warning. They fear that the throne is degrading, not awakening, but decaying into instability, that the energies long suppressed are leaking, unable to be contained, that the Emperor's soul, immense and weathered by 10,000 years of strain, may soon begin to rupture outward. If that happens, no one can predict what it would mean. Would he die? Would the warp ignite? Would the webway collapse? Or would he rise? Prophets of the ecclesiarchy claim that the throne is preparing for the second coming, that the Emperor is transcending his mortal cage, ready to manifest as a divine presence. Some say he has already ascended, and the throne remains only as a beacon, while his new form coalesces beyond time. Radicals within the Ordo Chronos suggest even stranger things, that the throne is reaching backward, altering history, refining timelines, preparing the galaxy for a rebirth by reshaping cause and effect through psychic anchor points. These theories are unprovable, but they spread, because even those who deny faith can feel it. The throne is not static, it throbs. The thrice-sealed archive of the Sigillite contains a final, unopened volume, one encoded with the direct psychic imprint of Malkador the hero. It can only be unlocked by one who possesses the soul pattern of the Emperor himself. It has remained sealed since the day of his enthronement. Recently, the psychic locks have weakened slightly. No one understands why. The custodes have begun rotating their vigil patterns more frequently. The Sisters of Silence, who have long stood mute in reverence, have requested access to the deeper webway chambers beneath the throne. The navigators of House Belisarius report that the Astronomicon now sings in harmonics unheard in recorded history, an overtone of grief and expectation. No command has been issued, no change has been declared. But across the Imperium, those with sensitivity to the warp, the astropaths, the seers, the weirds, have begun to dream a golden sun rising behind a ruined tower. A shadow moves across it. A figure, walking, burning, waiting. There are places in the galaxy where faith alone is not enough, where trenches are dug not in soil but in memory, where war is measured not in years but in generations. Cadia was such a place, a fortress world, a bastion, a sacrifice made manifest, and at the moment of its end, something impossible happened. Not just fire, not just ruin, a miracle. Cadia was more than just a planet. It was a gate. Positioned at the heart of the Cadian Gate, it stood as the first and most vital bulwark against the endless tides of chaos from the Eye of Terror. For 10,000 years, the sons and daughters of Cadia were born into war. Every child knew a lasgun before they knew peace. Every city was a bunker. Every breath was defiance. And they held, even through Abaddon's first 12 Black Crusades. But the 13th was different. The 13th Black Crusade, sometimes called the Long War's crescendo, came not as a wave, but as a tide drawn by an unseen moon. The forces of chaos did not simply attack. They invaded with purpose, precision, and unity not seen in millennia. Traitor legions surged forth from the Eye of Terror. The Death Guard unleashed pandemics across the outer defenses. The World Eaters shattered orbital bastions. The Word-Bearers whispered corruption into the minds of defenders. And Abaddon, the Despoiler, brought with him the greatest weapon the Imperium had ever feared. A Blackstone fortress, a relic capable of nullifying the psychic beacon of the Astronomicon and sundering the warp itself. Cadia stood, but it bled. Throughout this apocalyptic siege, the Emperor was silent. No visions, no dreams, no celestial signs. Many began to believe that Cadia had been abandoned, that perhaps, at last, the Emperor's vigilance had faltered, that he had given up the world which had given him so much. Then came the saint, Saint Celestine, once martyred, once entombed, now risen. She descended like a comet of light, wings of golden flame, a blade of incandescent fury. Where she walked, wounds healed. Where she struck, demons screamed in disbelief. She brought no army, only a few faithful warriors known as the Gemini Superia. But her presence changed the course of the war, because her presence proved one undeniable truth. The Emperor still watched. Celestine did not speak with authority. She spoke with certainty. She claimed no orders from the High Lords. She gave no tactical predictions. But every motion, every decision, seemed to align with the needs of the defenders. She appeared where the line was about to break. She led charges that turned slaughter into salvation. She crossed void-choked chasms with no bridge. She ignited hope where only ash remained. Even the most hardened veterans, men who had fought for decades, began to kneel in her presence, not out of command, out of belief. It was not just her power, it was what she embodied. Celestine was more than a warrior. She was a vessel, a conduit for something greater. The Adeptus Ministorum proclaimed her a living saint, an angel of the Emperor's will. Skeptics within the Inquisition questioned it. Some suspected trickery. Others believed she was a psychic phenomenon misinterpreted by the masses. But they could not deny the results. Where Celestine walked, the warp recoiled, not bent, not resisted, recoiled. Still, the tide was too vast. Even with Celestine, even with Cadian regiments bleeding every drop of courage they had, Abaddon's forces advanced. The Blackstone fortress fired again and again, each blast reshaping the orbital lattice, erasing stations, shattering moons. And finally, the great defense laser arrays, the pylons, began to fail. These ancient structures, whose technology predated even the Imperium, had long held the Eye of Terror in check. Their exact function remained a mystery to most, but they worked. They anchored reality. They resisted warp expansion, and Abaddon targeted them. As the last pylon fell, something impossible happened. The warp surged, space folded. The veil between real space and the immaterium collapsed into a howling storm. The Eye of Terror expanded, and Cadia, proud, unconquered, defiant Cadia, broke. Not from invasion, from gravity. From the impossible forces tearing at its core, its plates, its very matter. The planet's magnetic field failed, the tectonic crust shattered, oceans boiled, cities collapsed, fire raced across the skies. The Cadian gate was no longer a gate. It was open. Yet amid that ruin, Celestine still fought. She moved through the crumbling catacombs of Kasser Kraf, shielding the wounded. She pulled children from the rubble. Her sword, once searing bright, burned low, but it burned still. And then she vanished. Not killed, not captured, simply gone. Some say she ascended again, back to whatever realm she draws her light from. Others believe she was taken by the Emperor's will to prepare for what was to come. A few claim to have seen her afterward on other battlefields, other planets, always where the Imperium faced impossible odds. But what cannot be denied is this. As Cadia fell, the Emperor sent a sign. Not to save the world, but to show the galaxy that he was still watching. That faith, even in defeat, had meaning. In the aftermath, the questions began. Had Cadia truly been abandoned? Or was its fall part of something greater? Did the Emperor let it break, not from neglect, but from necessity? The events that followed, the resurrection of Robut Guillemon, the launching of the Indomitus Crusade, the awakening of dormant technologies, suggest that Cadia's death was not the end. It was a signal, a catalyst, the fire that would reignite a dying Imperium. The ecclesiarchy declared Celestine the second light of the throne. Her effigies were carved in cathedrals from Terra to Macragge. Pilgrimages formed, seeking pieces of Cadia's soil. Sermons invoked her name alongside the Emperor's own, and in the palaces of the silent custodes, no denial came, only silence. The Emperor did not save Cadia, but he showed that he still moved, through fire, through miracle, through the hand of a saint. The stars went out, no flicker, no dying fade, just silence. In an instant across entire sectors, suns dimmed behind curtains of void darkness. The Astronomicon, once the beating heart of navigation and order, went mute. The beacon that had burned for 10,000 years was gone. This was the Noctis Eterna, the Night Eternal, the single greatest psychic blackout in Imperial history. A time when even the most faithful believed the Emperor had finally turned his gaze away, And yet, even in that abyss, his hand could still be felt. The seeds of the Noctis Eterna were sown at the fall of Cadia. With the destruction of the planet's ancient pylons, the fabric of reality around the Eye of Terror collapsed. Warp energy surged outward in a torrent of unreality, consuming stars, swallowing void roots, and birthing a galactic scar. The Cicatrix Maledictum. A wound not just in space, but in time and truth, a gulf of madness that split the galaxy in two. Across this great rift, whole regions were cast into silence. The Imperium Nihilis was born, a dead zone of billions of systems cut off from Terra, from the Astronomicon, from hope. The first signs were subtle. Astropaths reported static. Vox traffic crackled and died. Then came the visions, flickers of gold turning to shadow, of thrones empty and ruined. Astro-telepathic choirs screamed in unison before going still. Navigation became impossible. On the forge world of Galmec Tertius, all servitors collapsed at once, twitching as if possessed by invisible threads. On Bastior, the sun dimmed to a pale red smear, casting eternal dusk across the surface. And then, silence. For the Imperium, a galaxy already straining beneath the weight of 10 millennia of war, the Noctis Eterna was more than catastrophe. It was revelation, a galaxy-spanning crucible of belief. Would the faithful still pray when the throne was silent? Would armies still march with no orders? Would the Imperium collapse into chaos, or would it endure? Many worlds did fall, isolated without guidance or hope. They turned to despair. Civil war, madness, rebellion, entire sectors imploded under their own fear. Chaos cults flourished in the vacuum. Demons manifested freely, no longer restrained by the throne's light. Some planets were simply unmade, twisted into realms of screaming metal and molten blood. But others held, because in the absence of the Emperor's voice, his silence became a trial, and the faithful endured. In High Vornax on Tarsis Nova, Cardinal Vorlin declared the silence a divine test. He climbed the cathedral spire alone and lit the great beacon with his own hands. No food, no water, just fire. He stood there for 7 days, his flesh burned black by the flames, screaming psalms into the empty sky. When the beacon finally went out, the people rose. With pitchforks and torches and broken rifles, they fought back the warp beasts crawling through their underhives. Not because they believed they would win, but because to fight was to serve. In the Segmentum Pacificus, a small Adeptus Sororitas convent, known as the Silent Martyrs, held the shrine world of Penthus, alone against the forces of the Word-bearers. Cut off, outnumbered, and wounded, they fought for 86 days without reinforcements. On the final day, with the chapel walls collapsing and the last sister bleeding in the nave, a solar flare ignited in the warp-darkened sky, burning the traitors to ash. No explanation was ever found. The ecclesiarchy called it the Tears of the Emperor. Throughout the Imperium Nihilis, stories like these began to spread. Not commands, not doctrine, legends, of golden dreams, of incorruptible saints, of burning eyes glimpsed in the warp. Even without the Astronomicon, the Emperor's wrath and mercy continued to ripple outward, not in overt actions, but in the small, undeniable ways only faith can measure. And then came the message, carried not by Vox or ship or psyker, but by a man. Robout Guilliman, the Primarch, returned, bearing the light of a new crusade, a reforged Imperium, and most importantly, the Emperor's word. For the first time in 10,000 years, someone had stood before the Golden Throne and survived. The God Emperor had not spoken in words, but through psychic communion, and through Guilliman, his will moved again. With the return of the Primarch came the Indomitus Crusade, a beacon not just of military might, but of renewal. Beacons called pharos were constructed across the void, powered by ancient Xenos technology. The light of the Astronomicon began to pierce the dark again. The ecclesiarchy proclaimed the end of the night eternal. A new dawn had come, but many knew better. The wound still remained. The cicatrix maledictum still howled. The warp was closer than ever. And the Emperor remained silent once more. Some within the Inquisition argue that the Noctis Aeterna was no mere disaster, that it was planned, that the Emperor allowed the Great Rift to open. Why? Because it revealed the rot, it showed who was loyal, it purged weakness. Across the Imperium Nihilus, those who survived were those who believed, those who did not crumble in the darkness, but lit candles anyway, who built shrines in the ruins, who fought until their hands broke and then kept fighting. In the silence, the Emperor found clarity. And so even now, many fear the return of the night, not because of demons or madness, but because they wonder, the next time the stars go out, will they still have faith? Will they be ready? For the golden throne remains unchanged. The Emperor does not weep, he does not speak, but sometimes his silence is louder than thunder. The galaxy was dying by inches, whole sectors lost to silence, millions of souls vanishing beneath warp storms, faith cracking beneath the pressure of a universe left seemingly abandoned. Terra remained a light, but the flame was faint. And then, after 10,000 years, the veil stirred, not with prophecy, not with thunder, but with the return of a name so steeped in legacy that it split reality itself. Robout Guilliman, the Avenging Sun, primarch of the 13th Legion, and now the Emperor's only living hope. His resurrection was no accident. For millennia, Guilliman's body lay preserved in a stasis field within the fortress of Hera on Macraga. Wounded mortally by Fulgrim, the Primarch had been frozen at the brink of death, a living statue of ice and silence. His loyal sons kept vigil, refusing to declare him dead, as if sheer devotion might compel the impossible. In the end, it did. The resurrection was made possible by Belisarius Cawl, Archmagos Dominus of Mars, who had served under the Emperor's direct command during the Great Crusade. For 10,000 years, Cawl had labored in secret, developing forbidden technologies, manipulating genetic blueprints, and crafting what would become the Primaris spacemarines. But Cawl's ambitions went beyond gene labs and armor variants. He had also been entrusted with a contingency, one he could only activate when the Imperium was truly on the brink, to awaken a Primarch. But even Cawl's genius would not have been enough. The key lay with Yvraine, High Priestess of the Inari, the mysterious faction of Eldar who worshipped the god of the dead, Iniad. Guided by strange visions and emboldened by her connection to the psychic death god, she arrived at Macraga amidst a chaos incursion. There, in the heart of a shattered temple, surrounded by battle, death, and collapsing fate lines, Yvraine used the power of the god of death to perform a miracle. With a single breath, the balance tipped. Robout Guilliman returned to the world of the living. He did not awaken as he had once been. For a Primarch, sleep is not dreamless. 10 millennia of suspended thought pressed into the cracks of his mind like water into stone. The galaxy he opened his eyes to was not his Imperium. It was an empire bloated with ritual, riddled with corruption, and ruled in name by a silent corpse on a throne of gold. What should have been triumph became horror. He was appalled. Gone was the enlightenment his father had envisioned. Instead, he found a feudal nightmare, a theocratic monstrosity where science had become religion and ignorance a sacred rite. Guilliman, the most pragmatic of the Primarchs, was aghast at the cult Imperialis, which now worshipped the Emperor as a god, a blasphemy the Emperor had explicitly condemned during the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade. Every bastion of reason Guilliman had once fought to build now echoed with hollow prayers. The Imperium had not merely survived, it had rotted. But Roboute Guilliman was not one to be paralyzed by grief. Within days of his return, he took command of the war effort on Macraga, coordinating defenses against the Thousand Suns and the traitor forces seeking to undo his rebirth. His tactical mind, forged in the crucible of galactic conquest, burned brighter than ever. But even he knew that salvation would not be won from Ultramar. He had to reach Terra. The journey across the stars was a gauntlet of madness. The galaxy had changed. Warp storms boiled across the major routes, and the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, had opened like a gaping wound across reality. The Eye of Terror had expanded, severing the Imperium in half. Guilliman's fleet, led by loyalists and shielded by Eldari allies, carved a path through burning skies and demonic tides. There were moments when even Guilliman wavered, seeing firsthand how fragile the Imperium had become. Not even his strategic mastery could restore what had been lost, but he pressed forward, driven not by faith, but by duty. He had to see his father. The reunion was nothing like the myths. Guilliman did not kneel. He did not cry. He stood before the golden throne, before a figure that radiated unimaginable psychic intensity, so powerful it threatened to dissolve thought itself. For hours he stood alone, soul laid bare, submerged in the psychic tides of the Emperor's presence. No words were exchanged, not because the Emperor could not speak, but because he no longer needed to. What Guilliman experienced cannot be transcribed. Even among the custodes, none speculate. The Lord Commander emerged from the Sanctum Imperialis altered, not just in resolve, but in perception. He claimed his father still lived, not in body perhaps, but in essence, that the Emperor fought a war far beyond human comprehension, a war of souls, of truth, of cosmic alignment. It was not Guilliman's to understand, it was his to protect. And so, Roboute Guilliman became Lord Commander of the Imperium, not just of the armies, of the entire empire. His first act was to launch the Indomitus Crusade, the most ambitious military campaign since the Great Crusade itself. Armed with primarchs marines, Call's secret weapons, and newly reforged fleets, Guilliman aimed to reconquer, reconnect, and rekindle what remained of the Imperium. But this was not a mission of conquest, it was a rescue. Guilliman marched not in glory, but in sorrow. Every planet reclaimed revealed new rot, civilizations worshipping false gods, imperial institutions functioning more as cults than administrations. Entire sectors obeyed laws based on misunderstanding. The Inquisition operated without oversight. Ecclesiarchs declared new saints weekly. But Guilliman did not flinch. He adapted, he reorganized, he endured. The Emperor never spoke to him again. Not in words. But Guilliman needed no reassurance. The moment at the throne had seared into him a single truth. His father had not failed. The Imperium had failed him. Guilliman's task was not to restore the past. It was to build a bridge to the future, one strong enough to carry humanity through the long night to come. He stood alone beneath the hollow vault of the Sanctum Imperialis, dwarfed by the immensity of the chamber carved into the bedrock of the Imperial Palace. The weight of millennia pressed down from golden domes, statues of saints and warriors gazing down with cold, lifeless eyes. Light filtered through stained glass mosaics of battles long mythologized, if not forgotten. Yet none of it mattered. Not the grandeur, not the silence. What mattered was the figure seated upon the golden throne, his father. And what had become of him? Roboute Guilliman, newly returned to the galaxy, had crossed half the stars to reach this point. From Ultramar to Terra through the warp storms of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the avenging sun had carved a burning path to reach the heart of the Imperium. His body, reborn through strange science and alien aid, was hale. His mind, sharpened through war and doctrine, was unbending. But nothing could prepare him for the moment he entered the throne room. For there sat the Emperor, not as Guilliman remembered, not as the warlord or the guiding hand of the Great Crusade, but a shattered titan of godlike psychic energy, locked in a throne of decaying divinity. The custodes did not speak. The Sisters of Silence said nothing. Even the High Lords, reduced to pale shadows of ancient power, dared not intrude. Guilliman passed through them like a ghost, the only figure allowed to approach the Emperor unbidden. And as he climbed the final steps beneath the vast arch of the Mechanicum's life support apparatus, he came face to face with the greatest paradox in human history. A dead god who yet lived. What followed cannot be truly recorded. There were no words, no spoken commands, no written decrees. Guilliman himself would later confess. What passed between him and the Emperor was not a conversation, but a communion, a bridge between mortal and divine, forged not of speech but of presence, of overwhelming psychic will. He stood in the eye of the storm, and he did not break. But he did change. Guilliman would later describe the experience in careful terms. He said it was like standing before the raw will of the universe, that his thoughts were peeled open, examined, and weighed, that every moment of his life, every triumph, every failure, every hesitation, was laid bare to his father's psychic scrutiny. There was no hiding, no pride, no delusion, just truth and pain. Because the Emperor was not angry, he was suffering. The Golden Throne had not been built to imprison him. It had been designed once, long ago, as a conduit. A gate into the webway. A miracle of science and sorcery, it had become a prison only through necessity. During the Horus heresy, the Emperor had sustained the device with his own power to keep the demonic tides at bay. In doing so, he sacrificed his own freedom. And yet he endured, not as a man, not as a god, but as a will. What Guilliman saw in those moments changed the trajectory of the Imperium. He realized that his father had not abandoned mankind. He was holding the line, alone, against the tides of the immaterium, against entities older than time, against powers that feasted on thought and dream. While the galaxy believed the Emperor was silent, he had been screaming, silently, into the warp, fighting a war of metaphysical endurance no mortal could comprehend. The throne was not a seat. It was a battleground. When Guilliman emerged from the throne room, the custodes saw it in his face. He was no longer the primarch of the Codex, no longer the general of Ultramar. He had become something else. Not a demigod, not an emperor in waiting, but a steward, a torchbearer for the will of the throne. In the days that followed, Guilliman made sweeping reforms. The High Lords, long stagnant and ceremonial, were sidelined. The Adeptus Administratum was reorganized. New chains of command were drawn up. The Indomitus Crusade was unleashed. But it was not done in a spirit of conquest. It was done to buy time, time for the Emperor to endure, time for humanity to adapt, time for a future to be possible again. Guilliman rejected the title of Emperor Regent, though some insisted he should rule, even proclaim him divine in his own right. He silenced such voices with fire and fury. He allowed no one to forget. The Emperor still lived, and Guilliman was not his replacement. He was his servant. It was in this mindset that Guilliman returned to the throne again and again. No other mortal in the galaxy was granted this access, not even the Ecclesiarch, not even the Fabricator General of Mars, only Guilliman. And each time he brought with him burdens, reports from distant crusades, visions of new threats, warnings of Xenos incursions, and the growing fear of chaos resurgence. But always he sought not permission, but guidance. Not through words, but through the intangible sense that he was being watched, weighed, judged. Some say the Emperor showed his approval through flashes of light across the Astronomicon. That warp storms briefly parted during Guilliman's visits, that astropaths nearby wept without knowing why, that the custodes, ever silent, would offer a rare nod in acknowledgement. But Guilliman did not need signs. He had stood before the throne. That was enough. Still, the experience left scars. He would often spend days alone after such communions, locked within chambers deep inside the imperial palace, his soul fatigued from proximity to such divine intensity. The fire of the Emperor's mind, even restrained within the throne, burned too bright for any mortal to endure for long. Even a primarch. Despite this, Guilliman persisted, because he knew one final truth, one that weighed on him more than any other. The Emperor could not leave the throne. Not yet. To do so would be to open the gates of the webway, to unleash a tide that no wall, no crusade, no legion could ever halt. So Guilliman bore the burden of the galaxy, so the Emperor could continue to fight alone. It began not with drums, nor banners, nor proclamation. It began with silence, the kind of silence that follows the passing of something ancient, the death of an age, the smothering of a dream. When Guilliman returned from the Golden Throne, the galaxy was already broken. The cicatrix maledictum had split the Imperium in two. Warp storms surged and howled across the stars, severing entire sectors from Terra. Worlds went dark, civilizations collapsed, the Astronomicon flickered like a candle in the void. The Imperium Nihilus, half of the human galaxy, was stranded, blind, leaderless. And then, amid that bleakness, came light. Not metaphoric, not spiritual, but the real burning kind, from warships that cleaved the void like blades, from plasma engines roaring across broken warp lanes, from 1,000 new heroes, clad in armor that gleamed like the storm-racked sun. This was the beginning of the Indomitus Crusade. Robout Guilliman had not simply returned to a galaxy in crisis. He had returned with a plan. From the moment he left the throne room, the Primarch had one mission: to buy time. The Emperor, entombed in suffering, could not act directly. The imperial machine was bloated, rusted, overgrown with myth and ritual. But Guilliman, a Primarch reborn, stood outside those chains. And so, he did what his father had once done. He forged an army. The scale was biblical. Billions of Astra Militarum soldiers were mobilized. Entire forge worlds were redirected. Naval yards lit up across Segmentum Solar and Pacificus. Fleets the size of sectors were recommissioned. The Titan legions stirred. The Sisters of Battle took up the hymns of fire once more, and then came the Primaris Space Marines. The culmination of 10,000 years of research by Belisarius Cawl. These transhuman warriors were bigger, faster, stronger, genetically engineered to outlast even the stalwart Astartes of old. Clad in Gravis armor or clad in stealth technologies, they represented the future Guilliman envisioned. Unbound by tradition, untethered by old dogma. Each chapter received reinforcements. Some were reforged entirely. Others, new chapters, were created to spearhead the reconquest of the galaxy. The Ultima founding had begun. But this wasn't a clean sweep across peaceful stars. It was a desperate push through a hellscape. Warp storms choked the major lanes of travel. Daemons bloated with millennia of unchecked worship ran rampant. Traitor legions, awakened by the tremors of Guilliman's return, turned their blades toward Terra once more. The Death Guard festered in plague-choked systems. The Black Legion marched under banners of vengeance. Tyranid splinters drifted in from the edges of known space. Necron tombs began to stir. Every step of the Indomitus crusade was paid in blood. Guilliman did not command from afar. He stood aboard the flagship Macragge's Honor, directing campaigns personally. In the Pariah Nexus, he ordered exterminators on an entire system corrupted by Necron engrammatic viruses. In the Khazant Belt, he battled alongside the Redemptors of the Adeptus Mechanicus, reclaiming ancient data vaults once thought myth. He personally led negotiations with chapter masters old enough to remember his name as Legend. He was a general, a diplomat, a hammer, a scalpel, and above all, a symbol. Some planets he liberated fell on their knees. Others turned their guns on him, corrupted by generations of isolation and heresy. But Guilliman did not waver. He did not seek their reverence. He offered them only service. Wherever the crusade marched, it brought more than warfare. It brought infrastructure. Call's Pharos beacons, reverse-engineered from ancient Xenos tech, were deployed across newly reclaimed sectors. These devices stabilized warp routes, enabling ships to see and speak again. The beacons were not just machines, they were promises. Promises that Terra still lived, that the light still shone. The ecclesiarchy, too, marched with the crusade. Though Guilliman distrusted the imperial cult, he understood its power. Saint Celestine appeared in several theaters of war, wreathed in fire and miracle. Her presence reinforced what Guilliman refused to say aloud, that the Emperor's will still moved, still chose champions, still endured. Not all victories were clean. In the Cryptus cluster, over 70 million humans were sacrificed to close a warp breach. Guilliman gave the order. On Eupraxia, he personally ordered the execution of an entire planetary governorate for turning from the Emperor in their isolation. When his own forces questioned the judgment, he reminded them, "Mercy is for the living, and loyalty is paid in deeds." As the crusade spread, so too did resistance. The Chaos Gods watched with fury. Guilliman was a threat they had not anticipated, a primarch uncorrupted by time or temptation. Where Horus had succumbed, Guilliman stood resolute. Where Lorgar had fallen into worship, Guilliman became the embodiment of secular will. Abaddon the Despoiler launched several counter-campaigns to halt the crusade. In the Battle of the Dagger Stars, the Black Legion laid a trap within a warp tide that cost Guilliman half a sector fleet. But he adapted, as he always had, turning the momentum back with surgical strikes. In time, the name Guilliman became as feared by the heretic as it was revered by the faithful. But not all enemies came from without. Within the ecclesiarchy there were whispers. Guilliman refused to acknowledge the Emperor as a god, honoring his imperial truth instead. This made him dangerous to the clergy. Some arch-cardinals tried to sideline him, others declared his actions heretical. But Guilliman knew the truth. Belief could be weaponized. He wielded the faith of the Imperium not as a priest, but as a tactician. He never once prayed, but he allowed others to. Because in a war of annihilation, even blind hope could be a sword. The first phase of the Indomitus Crusade lasted roughly a century, longer by some counts, fractured by warp dilation and inconsistent timelines. But in the eyes of the Imperium, it was both a war and a resurrection. Millions of worlds were reconnected, entire sectors realigned with Terra. New defenses were established, new orders forged, new heroes born. But Guilliman knew it was only the beginning. At the heart of the crusade was the same grim truth that haunted him. The Emperor would not rise, the throne would not be abandoned, and the future must be fought for with fire, steel, and unyielding discipline. By the time Guilliman returned to Terra at the close of the first phase, he did not bring laurels. He brought warning. The forces of chaos had adapted. The Great Rift was growing. The next war would not be a crusade. It would be a reckoning. It began in a place where no light could reach. The plague wars had raged for decades across the once proud realm of Ultramar. Planets burned. Populations fell to pestilence. And amid the rot and ruin, a new kind of war was being waged. One not just for territory, but for the very soul of the Imperium. The Garden of Nurgle had bloomed across reality, and standing at its center was the Diamond Primarch Mortarion, Lord of the Death Guard, Herald of the End. He had not forgotten his brother, and he had not forgiven him. Guilliman, the Avenging Sun, returned to Ultramar not as a liberator, but as a bulwark against entropy. He found his realm consumed, not just by battle, but by despair. The plague god's gifts had rendered entire planets into breathing wounds, civilizations turned into festering biomass. The air was thick with spores. Time itself stuttered under Nurgle's touch. But Guilliman stood unbowed. Where Mortarion brought disease, he brought order. Where the Death God sowed corruption, Guilliman sowed resistance. The plague wars became a contest between divine philosophies, stagnation versus discipline, rot versus resolve, chaos versus control. It all came to a head on the world of Iax. Once a paradise known for healing and renewal, Iax had been reduced to a necrotic battlefield. Nurgle had claimed it as his own, seeking to transform the planet into a beacon of decay, a symbol of his eternal dominion over life. It was here that Mortarion waited, not for conquest, but for retribution. The trap was brilliant in its simplicity. Using warp tides and corrupted navigators, Mortarion orchestrated a situation where Guilliman would be isolated. The Imperial advance had gained momentum, reclaiming planets across the Ultramar system, but Iax remained the linchpin. Guilliman, ever the tactician, knew that allowing Iax to fall would break morale across the entire crusade. He deployed himself personally. It was exactly what Mortarion had anticipated. The duel that followed was not a clash of brothers. It was a clash of gods. On the surface of the decaying world, amid dying forests and fetid rivers, Guilliman confronted Mortarion. The two stood in the ruins of a hospital once renowned for curing disease, now choked with flies and swollen flesh. Mortarion greeted him not with fury, but with mockery. "You fight for a corpse," he hissed. Guilliman's reply was steel. The battle was a whirlwind of power. Guilliman, wielding the hand of dominion, struck with righteous fury. Mortarion, cloaked in demonic essence, moved with inhuman grace, his scythe silence carving through air thick with corruption. For every wound Guilliman inflicted, Mortarion healed. For every parry, a spore cloud retaliated. It became clear, horribly clear, that Guilliman could not win. Not here, not alone. Mortarion unleashed the Godblight, a plague forged in the blackest depths of Nurgle's cauldron, designed not to kill the body, but to unmake the soul. It bypassed armor, ignored flesh. It sought Guilliman's essence, unraveling his very being at the molecular and metaphysical level. And for a moment, it worked. The Avenging Sun fell to his knees. Across Iax, across Ultramar, across the Imperium, Guilliman's fall echoed. But something else stirred, something ancient, something divine. No one can say what truly happened next. No record exists, no pict feed survived. The Sisters of Silence, who later combed the battlefield, found only scorched stone and silence. But Guilliman rose, not by will alone, but by a force greater than himself. The Emperor intervened, not with words, not with a voice booming from the sky, but with presence, pure, blinding, absolute. A psychic storm erupted from Guilliman's broken form, searing the air, vaporizing warp-born pestilence. The godblight recoiled, denied its final prize. Mortarion was thrown back, not physically but spiritually, ripped from the material plane in an explosion of light and pain. Witnesses, those few who survived, spoke of a blazing figure behind Guilliman. Wings of flame, eyes of burning gold, a halo of impossible geometry. Some called it a vision, others a psychic aftershock. But the truth could not be denied. The Emperor had acted. It was the first time in 10,000 years that the master of mankind had directly manifested through one of his sons. Whether it was Guilliman's resolve, Mortarion's blasphemy, or the sheer weight of the moment, something had breached the veil between the throne and the world, and that something had burned away the darkness. Guilliman did not speak of it afterward, not to his generals, not to the ecclesiarchy, not even to Call or the custodes. But those who saw him after the battle said he walked differently, not proud, not broken, but changed. There was weight in his eyes now, like he had seen something too vast to describe, something terrifying, something sacred. The plague wars did not end that day, but they turned. Imperial forces surged in morale, sweeping across contested systems with renewed fervor. The forces of Nurgle reeled, destabilized by the loss of Eax, and while the war would continue to burn, the momentum had shifted. The crusade had seen its darkest hour, and found light. The ecclesiarchy, predictably, turned the event into a miracle. The godblight miracle, they called it. Statues were raised overnight, hymns composed, paintings produced by scribes who had never left Terra. Guilliman's likeness became fused with that of the Emperor in devotional art. Despite his own commands against such things, he refused to endorse it, but he did not forbid it, because even he could not explain what had happened. In time, the truth of the event would pass into myth. Some claimed Guilliman had died and been resurrected by the Emperor. Others claimed he had become a vessel, a living saint of a god he still refused to acknowledge. But those closest to him knew this much. He had not sought the Emperor's hand. He had earned it. And in that moment, brief, blinding, impossible, the Imperium remembered something long forgotten, that the Emperor was not finished, that he still watched, still judged, still acted, when the need was great enough. Guilliman left Ajax in silence. He gave no speeches, held no ceremonies, but in his presence was something deeper than hope. It was faith, not in miracles, but in the certainty that the Emperor, even entombed, still fought, and that was enough. At the heart of the Imperial Palace, where the walls themselves hum with the pressure of psychic force, there is a silence deeper than death. The throne room, where the master of mankind has remained seated for over 10 millennia, unblinking and unmoving, locked in battle beyond mortal comprehension. And yet, in that silence, some say they have heard him speak, not with sound, not with voice, but with thought. Few in the galaxy are granted even proximity to the Golden Throne. Fewer still claim to have felt its presence truly, something that goes beyond grandeur or fear, an awareness, a scrutiny. For those within the sanctified walls of the inner palace, it is known by a dozen names: the radiance, the pressure, the weight. But among those whose souls remain intact long enough to emerge from that light, a more intimate term is often whispered: the voice. The Emperor does not speak often, nor does he speak to many. But when he does, it is undeniable. It is not a whisper, not a hallucination. It is a direct invasion of the mind, accompanied by pain, fire, and clarity so sharp it cuts into the marrow of who you are. What he chooses to say, when he chooses to say it, is unknown even to the High Lords of Terra. But there are moments that shape the galaxy. The Adeptus Custodes speak of such moments rarely. Their lives are spent guarding the Emperor's body, not in worship, but in duty. They do not believe. They know. And in their stoicism, even they acknowledge strange events. Custodian Guard Captain Tyvar reported one such incident after the Battle of Lion's Gate. He claimed to feel a psychic pulse from the throne as the traitor forces closed in. The pulse disabled a teleportation array, saving Guilliman from a warp-based assassination strike. When asked what he heard, Tyvar's answer was simple. "I did not hear. I understood." Malcador the Sigillite, long dead yet ever present in Imperial archives, was the first known mortal to experience the Emperor's psychic communication in full. Before the Siege of Terra, Malcador served as the Emperor's right hand, not because of titles or power, but because he could endure the voice. The Emperor's thoughts, when projected into the mind of a lesser being, are not like mortal ideas. They arrive all at once. Entire philosophies, memories, orders, questions, all compressed into a moment that feels like eternity. Malcador once described it as being shown a star and being told to understand it, love it, obey it, and to destroy it all at once. Since the heresy, few have claimed similar experiences, but among the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, the sanctioned psychers who fuel the Imperium's communication and navigation networks, patterns have emerged. Every year, dozens of astropaths go mad during alignment with the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse powered by the Emperor himself. These burnouts were once seen as tragic cost, but then came astropath Kairos Vale. He survived, and he remembered. Vale was a low-tier psyker, hardly worth mention, but during his communion with the Astronomicon, he experienced what the Telepathica later catalogued as a vision cascade. Unlike most who suffer seizures or burn away, Vale entered a comatose state for 79 hours. When he awoke, he spoke in the Emperor's voice, not mimicking it, not possessed, carrying it. His words were recorded by 7 scribes and later locked under inquisitorial seal. But what leaked through whispers, rumors, and forbidden data slates was this: "You are my hands, not my tongue, my will, not my witness. I speak now only when the silence becomes dangerous." Whether true or the product of madness, the Veiled Testament had ripples. Some inquisitors believed it an omen, others a hoax. But the sudden rise in psychic harmonics in the throne room that same week, measured and confirmed, forced even the Mechanicus to admit something had shifted. The Emperor had responded. Guilliman himself has never confirmed hearing the Emperor speak directly since his rebirth. But he has said this: "When I stand before the throne, I feel something more vast than language, something older than law. It is not love, it is not hate, it is duty distilled." And perhaps that is the only way the Emperor still communicates, with presence, with direction. But for others, especially in times of great peril, words still find their way through. There is the case of Saint Celestine. On several occasions, the living saint has claimed to receive visions, not from the Emperor's angels or the warp, but from the Emperor himself. These visions often align with strategic necessities, arriving at just the right moment to change the course of battle or provide insight that no mortal command could offer. When interrogated by ecclesiarchal authorities, carefully, reverently, Celestine said, "He speaks when we forget we need him, and then reminds us we always did." Her presence at the Battle of Ophelia 7, where she arrived hours before the planet's astropathic relay collapsed, is considered a divine intervention by most imperial clergy. Guilliman, however, remains silent on her case. Even within the Mechanicus, a few magi believe they've heard the Emperor's voice, not spiritually, but in data. Machine priests studying the core command protocols of the Golden Throne occasionally receive strings of binary code that appear sentient, not random, not corruption, but purposeful, In the Martian archives, a forbidden string translated from pure logic back to Gothic reads, "Do not preserve my body, preserve their future." The line has been declared apocryphal by the Fabricator General, but whispers still echo in the Red Temples. Inquisitors, too, keep records of such moments. Across the scattered archives of the Ordo Malleus, there are dozens of redacted reports detailing individuals, always psychers, always in times of crisis, who claim to have felt the Emperor's mind, often just seconds before demonic incursions or warp ruptures. One such inquisitor, Katarin Vale, documented her experience in a locked vault beneath the Schola Progenium of Tranche. He does not guide, he pushes. He does not console, he commands. He does not ask, he decides. She died 11 minutes later in a demonic ambush, her soul shielded long enough for her team to survive. And then there is the Black Ships. Among the thousands of psychers harvested from the Imperium each year, 1 in every 1,000 claims to hear the Emperor before they're consumed by the throne's mechanisms. Most are dismissed as hallucinations, but there are patterns, phrases repeated. You are fuel, you are sacrifice, you are necessary, not cruel, not loving, just absolute. In the end, the Emperor's voice may not be what we understand as communication. It may be influence, pressure, clarity forced through chaos. What matters is not the voice itself. What matters is what happens after it's heard. A psyker screams and sacrifices themselves. A saint burns with unnatural fire. A primarch returns from death. A decision changes the fate of a sector. The voice of the Emperor is not prophecy. It is purpose, undeniable, irresistible, and still very, very real. The Golden Throne. To the countless faithful of the Imperium, it is the holiest artifact in existence. A sacred relic, a symbol of the Emperor's undying will, the nexus of power around which the stars themselves revolve. But to those few who have dared to glimpse its truth, not in ceremony, not in dogma, but in function, the Golden Throne is something else entirely. It is not a seat. It is not a throne. It is a prison. Built in the Forgotten Age before the Unification Wars, the device was never meant to sustain a corpse. It was never meant to preserve a dying god. The Golden Throne was the apex of a plan that would, if successful, elevate mankind beyond the reach of the warp forever. The Webway Project. At its heart, the Emperor sought to render humanity immune to the perils of chaos. The warp was a tool, not a sanctuary. His goal was to build a self-contained webway, a network of reality tunnels independent from the immaterium, connecting human worlds without ever needing to touch the Sea of Souls. And the Golden Throne was the key, a psychic interface powerful enough to breach into the webway without demon incursion, anchored to Terra through unimaginable force. But that dream died in fire. The war within the webway, a conflict erased from most Imperial records, was a last stand, a battle not just for a city or a planet, but for the soul of the future itself. The Emperor, once guiding his legions across the galaxy, was forced to retreat into the depths of the Imperial Palace, taking up the burden of holding the webway gate closed, alone. The Golden Throne, never intended for perpetual use, became a battlefield in its own right, and the Emperor, seated within it, became the only shield between humanity and absolute annihilation. 10,000 years have passed since that moment. The throne has changed. It was once a crown of science. Now it is an altar of sacrifice, a machine whose hunger is unending, requiring the psychic deaths of 1,000 souls every day to keep it running. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintain it, but none understand it fully. No schematic remains complete. No diagram survives in full. Every repair is guesswork. Every calibration is a ritual. The Emperor himself sustains it, at horrific cost. His body is no longer flesh, not in any human sense. It is a vessel of psychic intensity, molten thought barely contained behind layers of gold, adamantium, and techno-arcana. The support systems encasing him are the size of cathedrals, drawing energy from fusion cores and plasma feeds that power entire city blocks. Arcane script, both imperial and pre-imperial, coils through every cable. The room glows faintly from the inside, heatless, pale light that never dims. And within, he watches. He does not sleep. He does not speak. But he is aware. The Mechanicus worship the throne as a machine god avatar. To them, the Emperor has merged with the device, becoming the Omnissiah incarnate. They approach repairs as rites, replacing burned-out psi conduits through chants and incense, speaking prayers before engaging fusion backups, and consulting fragments of data coffin recordings from pre-heresy eras. But even they admit, the throne is dying. Its systems are failing. More sacrifices are needed now than a millennium ago. Some techno-archaeologists fear that without radical reactivation, the entire construct may collapse, taking the Emperor's mind with it. To prevent this, the Adeptus Custodes have begun authorizing more frequent hunts for high-value psychers across the Imperium. The black ships travel further and more often. The palace's soul grinders consume lives daily, and the souls of those psychically attuned are burned like fuel within the labyrinthine pylons beneath the throne chamber. Some whisper the Emperor's psychic field has grown erratic. Moments of dormancy, spikes of volatile power. At least one event, the so-called Golden Pulse, shattered machinery across the palace's inner sanctum, killing dozens of scribes and mutating a half-dozen servo skulls into screaming piles of warp flesh. It was blamed on a power surge, but those who were there insist otherwise. Guilliman has inspected the throne himself. He emerged from that encounter changed. In council, he described it as a miracle of science, sabotaged by necessity, transformed into a reliquary of damnation. He ordered the Mechanicus to redouble efforts to find a way to stabilize the systems. Some claimed he even approached Call with requests to design a replacement. Call refused, not out of loyalty, out of fear. For the Golden Throne is not just life support, it is a bastion. The Emperor uses it to project his will into the warp, not as a beacon, but as a shield, an anchor point from which his soul resists the tides of chaos. The Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse guiding humanity's ships, is merely a side effect of his continued existence. The true function of the throne is to keep the webway gate closed, and the demons beyond it out. To abandon it would be to let that door swing wide, and behind it waits a storm older than time. There have been attempts to interface with the machine more directly. Some tech priests, emboldened by visions or corrupted by hubris, have tried to merge with its lesser consoles. Few survive. Most suffer brain death instantly. The most successful was Magus Thraxian, who claimed to have received pure purpose before combusting internally in front of an entire council of lords. The logs of his final moments were sealed by the Inquisition, but one phrase remains unredacted. I felt him. He is awake, but he cannot move. To most, the throne is a myth made real, a sacred fixture, but in truth, it is a paradox. It keeps the Emperor alive. It also kills him slowly. It preserves the Imperium. It ensures it can never evolve. It is the foundation of everything humanity has become, and the reason it can go no further. And so every day the galaxy spins on the edge of a blade, because the throne works. But one day, it won't. Deep beneath the throne room, in sealed vaults known only to the custodes, there are backup systems, fail-safes from the dark age of technology. Some say these contain fragments of the Emperor's original will, others believe they are decoys. One theory suggests the Emperor made copies of his consciousness before the Webway War, and that they could be activated in extremis, but to do so would risk fracturing the tenuous grip he still has over reality, and if he breaks, the veil breaks. There are those who believe he remains by choice, that the Emperor is not trapped, but enduring, using the throne as a tool to project his will across space-time, that he could leave but chooses not to, that this is sacrifice incarnate. Others argue the opposite, that he is trapped in a decaying husk, his divinity stripped, his mind barely clinging to identity, feeding on souls just to think. Perhaps both are true, perhaps neither. But whatever the truth, the Golden Throne remains the fulcrum of the galaxy's fate, and it is cracking. The journey begins not in light but in silence, a silence so complete it presses on the ears like pressure from the depths of the void. This is how it starts for the Psychers taken aboard the black ships, silent, stripped, and already half dead from fear. For most, the destination is oblivion, but for a chosen few the path ends at the foot of the Golden Throne, and what awaits there is not salvation, but the last pilgrimage. Across the Imperium, thousands of sanctioned Psychers are harvested each Terran cycle. Their minds are tested, broken, reforged. The strongest are assigned to the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, their lives repurposed to serve aboard ships or in battle. The weak are discarded, and the rest, the vast remainder, are sent to Terra, not for glory, but for fuel. The black ships are dark by design. No windows, no light beyond what is absolutely necessary. Psychers are transported in silence, each caged in their own cell, psychically muzzled and chemically subdued. Screams echo through steel halls day and night, but are rarely answered. The navigators dare not hear too much. The crew wear earplugs and recite litanies of forgetfulness, for the ship is haunted, not by ghosts, but by raw human potential, uncontrolled, dangerous, necessary. Arrival at Terra is not triumphant. There are no banners, no horns, no parades, only process. Each Psyker is catalogued, evaluated, sorted by potency and compatibility. The vast majority are taken below, into the endless catacombs beneath the Imperial Palace, where they are fed, mind and soul, into the sacred mechanisms that sustain the Astronomicon. Their deaths are not remembered. Their names are not spoken again. But among every 10,000 there is one, a whisper, a variable, a soul too sharp, too bright, too resonant to be merely consumed. These rare individuals are selected for the final offering. No records list the number of Psychers who have stood at the foot of the Golden Throne and lived. But stories persist, shared by lowly attendants, passed between generations of mute servitors and mute sisters of silence. The tale of the last pilgrim, a soul who, instead of dying for the Emperor, is heard by him, not in words, but in essence. The journey from the processing chambers to the Sanctum Imperialis takes days. The Psyker walks under constant guard, flanked by towering custodes and shrouded sisters. Each step is measured, each breath monitored. The path winds through sacred vaults, neural dampeners humming against the very skin, past frescoes so ancient they predate the Imperium itself. At the gates of the throne room, the soul begins to break, not from fear, but from proximity. The air inside the sanctum is heavy with psychic gravity. Space seems to warp around the throne, time stretching and compressing in odd rhythms. The Emperor's presence radiates like a star held just inches from one's mind, burning without fire, loud without sound. And then, the pilgrim sees him. He is not a man. He is not a god. He is something else, a silhouette of golden ruin encased in a mountain of machinery, light leaking through cracks in his divine shell. The sheer scale of the Golden Throne defies logic. Cathedrals are built within its scaffolds. Choirs live and die beneath its pylons. The emperor sits at the heart of this machine like a sun held in stasis, unmoving, unyielding. The psyker collapses to their knees, every time. Then comes the moment of communion. There is no ceremony, no priest, no hymn, no grand announcement. The emperor simply looks, and the soul is laid bare. What happens next cannot be described. Words fail. Thought disintegrates. The soul is stretched across eternity, examined, weighed, judged. Every memory, every lie, every sin and kindness becomes visible. Some psychers scream for days, others never speak again. A rare few survive, changed. They emerge from the throne room hollowed yet bright, marked though not visibly. The custodes who escort them do not speak. The sisters do not meet their gaze. These individuals are then taken into the vaults of silence, where they are studied, observed, and kept far from others. Why? The Imperium never says, but some believe the Emperor imparts something into them. A fragment, a directive, a spark. Occasionally, one of these pilgrims disappears, removed from the vaults without record, their identities erased. Whispers among certain inquisitors suggest that these few are reshaped into living weapons, agents of the throne sent to perform missions too sacred or too dangerous for any servant of man. Others say they become mouthpieces, wandering saints whose words burn with impossible insight, but no one knows for certain. Because those who return from the throne rarely speak of what they saw, and when they do, they weep. There are stories, of course, myths wrapped in ritual. One tells of a boy from Necromunda, mute since birth, but gifted beyond measure. He was brought before the throne as a sacrifice, but instead of dying, he sang. The song burned through the air, echoing across Terra. The Astronomicon flared like a nova for 3 full seconds. The boy vanished, never to be seen again. The Adeptus Ministorum declared it a miracle. The Inquisition sealed the records. The Mechanicus tried to replicate it and failed. Horribly. Not every journey ends in revelation. Many psychers simply burn. Mind and soul turn to ash in a flash of golden light. Some dissolve entirely, leaving behind only scorch marks and whispers. Others convulse, speaking in tongues long forgotten, uttering truths so raw they collapse into catatonia. But even in these deaths, the Imperium finds meaning. For every sacrifice strengthens the throne, every soul fuels the Emperor's will, and every final step, every last heartbeat is offered not for reward, but because he requires it. There are no monuments for these pilgrims, no tombs, no statues, only duty, only the knowledge that in the last moment of their existence they stood before him, and he saw them. Across the stars, across the centuries, across every flickering candle of human hope in a galaxy drowned in blood, one presence endures, silent, vast, unbroken. The Emperor of mankind, once conqueror, once father, once creator, is now something else entirely. His body lies immobile upon the golden throne, but his mind stretches across reality like the shadow of a mountain falling over a battlefield. Even in death, especially in death, he watches, he endures, he remembers. In the age of ending, when the Astronomicon flickers and warp storms split the galaxy in two, when the Emperor's dominion shudders beneath the weight of 1,000 failing worlds, his vigilance becomes not a matter of doctrine or myth, but of existential necessity, because what remains of his mind is all that keeps the Imperium from annihilation. No longer is he the general who led thunderous armies, no longer the gene crafter who shaped the primarchs, no longer the voice in the halls of the imperial palace or the hand upon Guilliman's shoulder. The Emperor is now a will, pure directionless to those who cannot see its current, but ever moving. He has become the beating heart of mankind's continued resistance, and that heart, though wounded, still pulses with impossible strength. It is a mistake to imagine the Emperor as passive. Though his body is locked in gold and circuitry, his consciousness, what survives of it, spans far beyond that throne. In the warp, where time is a circle and thought is substance, his presence is like a lighthouse held against the endless tides of corruption. He does not sleep. He does not drift. He fights every second, every breath, every flicker of starlight that still shines in the void is, in part, because he wills it to. The Astronomicon, often misunderstood as merely a navigational aid, is a consequence of his presence, not its purpose. It is not a flare sent into the dark. It is a side effect, a leaking radiation of his psychic mass, visible only to those attuned to the sea of souls. More importantly, within the deeper currents of the immaterium, his mind exerts a shape, a correction, a constant pressure against entropy. The chaos gods, vast and predatory, still turn from that brightness, not out of fear, but out of frustration. They could not defeat him, not even through Horus. They could only contain him. And so he waits, inside his prison, while the war rages without end. Yet even in this inert state, his mind reaches us, in dreams, in omens, in the quiet knowledge of those psychers who tremble before their duties but do not falter, in the decisions of commanders who suddenly know what must be done, in the prayers of the desperate whose pleas sometimes, against all odds, are answered. These moments are not coincidence. They are the traces of his thought, fragments of a mind so massive, so enduring, it cannot help but radiate influence. The silent watchers, the adeptus custodes who have stood beside him for 10,000 years, report strange incidents, always brief, always subtle. One speaks of a single flicker in the throne's power field, just as a traitor warband breached the palace's outer perimeter. Another swears he felt a voice, not in sound, but in certainty, when Guilliman re-entered the throne room after 10 millennia. The Emperor, they say, knew he was coming, and welcomed him. Guilliman himself has never confirmed this directly, but he has said this: there are no longer conversations, but there is understanding, and that is enough. He alone has stood before the throne more than any other since the heresy. He alone has felt the pressure of that gaze and returned unbroken. And it is he who now speaks in the Emperor's name, not as a prophet but as a bridge, and bridges are built for crossing. Some among the Mechanicus whisper that the Emperor's mind is evolving, that he is no longer the being he was, that 10,000 years of immobility, of relentless thought, have transcended him, that his consciousness is no longer bound to identity, but has begun to align with the greater shape of human destiny. This theory terrifies as many as it intrigues, because, if true, it means the Emperor is not just surviving, he is ascending. Others warn against such thinking. The Inquisition in particular is quick to silence voices that suggest the Emperor is changing. To them, he must remain immutable, eternal, defined. Any suggestion that he is becoming something new risks destabilizing the already fragile orthodoxy of unity. But the truth, as always, does not care for comfort, and in the hidden corners of the Librorius Sanctus, buried within forbidden tomes, are accounts of a coming awakening. A moment prophesied by the prophets of the flame, long thought extinct. A future where the Emperor will cast off the throne, not as man, not as God, but as pure force. What this means remains unknown and terrifying. Meanwhile, his eternal vigil continues. The Emperor's thoughts pulse through the web of astropaths, sometimes blinding, sometimes gentle. His will is felt in the movements of crusades launched seemingly without cause, only to later uncover great evil buried beneath innocent soil. Some say he now sees all, that there is no corner of the Imperium hidden from him, no plan, no treachery, no plea unnoticed, that his mind has fused with the very pattern of humanity's existence, becoming its memory, its shadow, its shield. But even so, he remains alone. What toll must this take? What pain must a mind suffer to witness every injustice, every betrayal, every failure of his children, and yet be unable to act directly? What burden must it be to endure worship and war in equal measure, hearing prayers that can never be answered? This is the vigil, not one of rest, but of sacrifice renewed every moment of every day, without sleep, without escape, without end. And yet, despite it all, despite the weight of a dying Imperium, despite the failure of the Great Crusade, despite the loss of his sons and the chains of the Golden Throne, the Emperor endures. He endures because we need him. He endures because the alternative is a galaxy consumed in fire. He endures because, in the darkest night, a light must still burn, even if no one sees it, even if it flickers, even if it is alone. He is not the Emperor we remember. He is not the Emperor we worship. He is the Emperor that remains, and though he may never rise again, he still watches, he still waits, he still wills, and that, in the end, may be enough to save us all.